Europe may be facing a gathering storm of the financial kind. On the one front is deflation, on the other is defiance, as Greece seems to be digging in its heels. Well, this is just one of the several major stories we'll be covering in the hour ahead. A Rise Review begins right now. Peace talks take aim at the rise of violence in East Ukraine, but Russian-backed separatists aren't backing down. Even as reports come in that ISIL is being pushed back, the jihadist group brutally executes another hostage. Two super wealthy brothers and their super wealthy friends are planning to shake up the next American election. One of the most controversial Super Bowls in its 5-decade history is getting ready to kick off in Arizona. And in Equatorial Guinea, unusual move decided who would advance at the Africa Cup as the event heads into its final week. Hello, I'm Julian Phillips. Welcome to the latest edition of Arise Review. We begin with breaking news from northern Nigeria. There is a fierce battle going on in the city of Maiduguri. Early today, Boko Haram launched an attack on the capital of Borno State, and government troops are fighting back at this hour. Well, this day reporter Michael Olugbode is in the war zone and is on the phone. Apparently, we don't have him right now, so hopefully we'll get him later. A lot going on there. We're going to move on, but of course we'll come back to that. Here are some of the other stories making headlines around the world. Pro-democracy protesters are back in the streets of Hong Kong. Thousands of people are once again demanding Beijing loosen its control over nominations for elected office. U.S. health officials are trying to get a handle on a growing measles outbreak. Already, there are more cases across the country than typically appear in an entire year. It's believed the current contagion began at Disneyland. Now it's in 14 states. The daughter of the late Whitney Houston is in a medically induced coma in a Georgia hospital. 21-year-old Bobby Christina Brown was found unresponsive in her bathtub early yesterday, a tragic echo of her mother's death 3 years ago. Again, we will talk about the unrest in northern Nigeria later on in the show, but right now, some are calling it the winds of change. Others are warning that Greek defiance could set off a tidal wave that will sweep across Europe, bringing extremists to power. Well, during a tense meeting with lenders, Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis rejected extending the bailout under the current terms. But the Prime Minister is not sounding quite so harsh. Alexis Tsipras says he's willing to negotiate. This comes after Greek voters elected the Syriza party, which wants to end austerity to measures imposed by creditors. Those creditors, led by Germany's Angela Merkel, are saying no dice. They say the Greeks have to live up to their commitments. Well, in Spain, meanwhile, a massive rally. The leftist party Podemos is hoping to follow in the Greek slipstream and reject austerity, raising fears that other countries will follow suit. Well, the timing couldn't be worse. The Eurozone is slipping into a deflationary economy, as many of you already know. Prices across Europe fell more than 0.5% in January. Steve Aconto is with the Council of Core College. Steve, how much is Greece stirring up here? How much of a tempest are they?
Well, it's not a tempest in a teapot. It's a big cauldron.
Yeah.
And the cauldron's the Mediterranean. Because you've got, look at Italy, Spain, and Greece. Think Portugal. You've got a cauldron. You have individuals who have elected from the left who are moving to the center so that they have stronger negotiating power. You've got the strongest of the leaders in the Mediterranean is Matteo Renzi, who just appointed, essentially negotiated the appointment of a new president, which gives him some glue in government. And you have these individuals together in the belief that they are economically stressed because of German accounting and the EU rules.
Okay, well, I just want to mention German accounting. Some say Germany perhaps has more to do with this than anybody else, or their own self-interest over the interests of the entire EU.
Well, deflation, which today in the United States refers to a football, but deflation for the most part in Europe augurs very badly for Germany and the so-called northern countries. Mm-hmm. The lowering of prices, the destabilization of the bond markets, they have to have their own interest at stake here, and they do.
Okay, well, they've been teetering on the fringe of for a long time here. I mean, we're talking about unemployment there at 25% overall for the national group, and then I think at least 50% for younger people.
Yeah.
How do you recover from something?
Well,
like
you don't. Deflation means stagnation. Stagnation there will be some prosperity in the so-called Mediterranean countries. They will, as Greece has, they'll have growth as a consequence of some deflation. But the northern countries, it spells disaster. Incidentally, one of the pieces coming into play now is the potential relationship between Tsipras and Greece with Vladimir Putin.
Right.
In other words, in the alignment of things, we have another outside player who's an opportunist.
Putin figures into everything.
He does. He does. God bless him. He is.
I don't know about all that. But
well, no, he's there. He's smart. He's cunning. He's not responsive. He's proactive.
Well, Varoufakis says he won't deal with what he calls Troika. That's, of course, the European Central Bank, EU, and the IMF. So whom will he deal with? He's got to deal with somebody.
Possibly Putin. But frankly, he could wait. No, it's true. And when they meet this Thursday, the answer will be that that Greece is going to wait for a proposal, I believe, to come to them. And I don't know if it's going to come. But right now, for the new government, nothing happening except a few symbolic moves is good for the new government, Tsipras.
Okay, what happens if Greece leaves the Eurozone?
It would be a problem for the Eurozone because it would confirm subliminally. And
bigger than any other country leaving?
No, not at all. But it would confirm to many in that basin the fact that the European Union is an arbitrary enterprise that doesn't really serve every one of its constituents, and that it's dominated by countries whose standards are different and whose realities are different from those in the Mediterranean basin. Well, I think it's a confirmation more than anything else.
Well, I tell you, with Putin in the mix here, a whole lot of things are going on. I guess what, this is not going away, and you're going to be back, I'm sure, next week to talk more about this. Hope things don't get too much worse.
Hope it gets better.
To say the least. Steve Okunto, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Julian.
All right. Well, the fighting continues in East Ukraine between separatists and government forces, but there's at least a gesture towards peace taking place this weekend. Representatives from both sides got together in Minsk, Belarus, and the talks are mandated by last September's ceasefire agreement. But the fire has not ceased. In fact, separatists have been gaining ground in recent weeks, and Kiev says Russian troops are pouring into the area, no doubt. Well, our good friend Ambassador William Courtney has extensive experience in the region. He served as special assistant to the president on Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. Ambassador, welcome to Arise Review.
Thank you.
Why can't a ceasefire hold there, in your opinion?
Well, it appears that Russia wants to expand the amount of territory in Ukraine that it controls. It was satisfied with parts of Donbass and Luhansk regions several months ago. There was a lull in fighting. It's expanded recently. So the question now is, do the Russians want to take control of Mariupol, the key seaport at the north of the Azov Sea, or do they want to go further, build a land bridge to Crimea, which they already occupy, or go even further and seize Odessa, which is Ukraine's third largest city and largest seaport?
Well, I guess, Ambassador, maybe it's not so much a question, do they want to take control? I think most people really realize at this point that Russia does want to take control. They want more. They want to get straight to Kiev. At this point, can they be stopped?
Well, they can be stopped. Now, it's not clear they want to go all the way to Kiev or even Odessa, for example. But the issue of being stopped depends really on, at this point, on the West providing some military assistance to Ukraine, which it has been unwilling to do. A group of distinguished U.S. statesmen tomorrow are going to issue a report calling for defensive lethal military aid to Ukraine, but President Obama and some of the other Western countries have been opposed to that so far.
Well, this could lead down, Ambassador, in all due respect, to a slippery slope. You're talking about providing military assistance here. In what form? Obviously, we're not talking about boots on the ground. Are we talking just about money, supplies? What are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about money and supplies, you're right. We're also talking about anti-tank weapons, which are good for defense, but not really good for offense. The Ukrainians would like the U.S. Javelin anti-tank system. There are secure command and control systems, intelligence and reconnaissance information that could be provided to the Ukrainians. Those kinds of things together could enhance Ukrainian military capability, even in the short run.
Ambassador, we've talked about, we've heard, of course, Barack Obama, the U.S. president, talking about sanctions and perhaps imposing more sanctions from the United States and the West. Are these sanctions really doing any good at this point, based upon what we're looking at right now?
Well, the sanctions actually have more impact than people expected. At first, there was criticism that they were too weak. But what they did do in Russia was frighten investors, and so investors stopped investing. Capital flight from Russia, people who had money took more of it out, not just because of those sanctions, but because of uncertainty about whether sanctions would increase and what broader kind of conflict there would be between Russia and the West. It's important that sanctions, though, target people responsible for the aggression in Ukraine and not target the ordinary Russians or civil society, private business, that sort of thing.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, as you know, is going to the region. What can he expect to accomplish?
Well, he'll be going to Ukraine to provide reassurance to the Ukrainian authorities. Hopefully, he'll also be conveying a message about willingness of the U.S. to provide more military support to Ukraine. So that's kind of a diplomatic message, if you will. In addition, he's going to the Munich Security Conference right after that later this week, and we'll be discussing these issues there. So this will be a forum for wider discussion of Russia's aggression in Ukraine and what are the consequences and what should be the Western response. Secretary Kerry was going to go to Moscow, but he's given up on that idea, and that's probably sensible because right now it looks like the Russians are not really interested in negotiating on anything, judging by the failure of the Minsk talks yesterday when the separatists refused even to discuss anything.
Ambassador, I just want to press you on something respectfully, sir. We value your opinion here. There are some that would suggest, as I mentioned earlier, that Putin particularly wants to take back control of many of the satellite states that they lost when the Soviet Union was dissolved. You're saying it's not so clear that they might not want to go all the way, or they might go all the way to Kiev. Well, why do you say that?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, already Russian forces now, with their recently expanded aggression, are taking much higher casualties than before, partly because they're attacking fortified locations in Mariupol and Debaltseve, right at the north of the Azov Sea. The further west they would go into Ukraine, probably the stronger the resistance would be. And in Russia, the Kremlin has tried to hide the fact that Russian forces are in Ukraine and the Russian troops are dying there. So there is internal public opinion that is an important factor.
Right. Okay, well, look, I tell you what, I'm going to try to put my money on you on this one, Ambassador. You're pretty good at this stuff. I hope that's the case, that they don't go any farther at this point. In fact, the world is hoping that they don't.
Well,
Ambassador,
they may go a little farther.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll see what happens. But, of course, we'll have you to give us some more insight on that. And thank you, of course, for your insight this week, sir.
You're quite welcome.
Okay. Well, as we reported earlier, there's a battle going on in the northern Nigerian city of Maiduguri. Boko Haram is on the attack. This day reporter Michael Olugbode is on the phone from the war zone. Michael, what's going on there right now?
It's a little bit calm now, but early in the morning there was an attack on the town by the insurgents. They tried to invade the town, but they were repelled by the military. We learned that about 80 of them were killed in the attack.
How are the people in Maiduguri reacting right now? And I guess, do they have any confidence that this government that's in place right now can do anything to hold off or stem the attacks by Boko Haram?
All they have been receiving were promises from the government. People here are really tired because some of them felt that the government have not been able to fight back the Boko Haram 4 years from when the insurgency actually started. Some of them are even leaving the town. They believe that the election is far approaching and there could be a problem in the town because now we are seeing insurgency. And just over a week now, just about a week or 2 weeks now, we are going to have our election. They believe that the insurgency may be on the increase. That means there could be so many attacks during the election. So some of them are already leaving town.
Michael Olugbade reporting from Nigeria live. Michael, thank you so much for that report. And coming up next, new challenges for the Obama administration in the Middle East. And of course, you're watching Arise Review.
The best way to predict the future is to create it.
There's a special breed of achievers out there
that call tomorrow's people the highly creative ones who live in the future. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They are bold. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. We've been able to grow our bank to become a leading player in Nigeria with a strong presence across the continent, adopting best practice in everything we do. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Those who shape tomorrow strive for and demand perfection. At Access Bank, our service culture of speedy response and drive for excellence is the blueprint for creating customer experiences that will echo for generations. Come, let's work together and take tomorrow.
Well, Arise is the only network that really covers comprehensively the African diaspora. It gives people in other parts of the world of color a chance to know about people here in the United States, us to know about them, and the world to know about us. So it's kind of an educational experience for everybody involved. Getting to know people through stories, through personal stories. You really get a chance to know what people are actually all about, what communities are about. How are we different? But more importantly, what commonalities we all share.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms, just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not gonna do anything, they're either on drugs or they got pregnant at an early age, and I just wanna say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Review. The challenges in the Middle East seem to just continue mounting. Despite negotiations to free Japanese journalist Kenji Goto, he has apparently been executed by ISIL, according to reports. He's the second Japanese hostage beheaded in a week. Well, the fate of the Jordanian pilot, First Lieutenant Moaz al-Kazabeh, is still unknown, but ISIL has had its setbacks. Kurdish forces are pushing back in Kirkuk, and an airstrike reportedly killed the terror group's chemical weapons expert. Egypt's President al-Sisi cut short his attendance at the African Union meeting to return to deal with the recent terror attack in the north of that country. More than 30 police and soldiers were killed. ISIL-linked Sinai Providence claimed responsibility. Al-Sisi told his countrymen to prepare for a long battle with terrorism. Well, a move that drew immediate criticism, Israel announced a new round of settlements will be constructed on the West Bank. The U.S. and the EU say more settlements will destabilize the peace process, such as it is. Well, and Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei says there can be no deal on the country's nuclear program unless sanctions are lifted immediately. Well, the deadline to reach an agreement is March 24th. That's right around the corner. Arise News contributor Eric Ham is in Washington. Eric, got a lot to cover here. Let's start with the situation in Israel. The country's relations with the U.S. seem to be under a strain, to say the least. Eric, do you hear me? I don't know.
Okay, I hear you now.
Okay, yeah, we're talking about Israel, starting off with that first. A lot of ground to cover here. The relations between the U.S. and Israel are undoubtedly under a strain right now.
Absolutely. And before I get started talking about that, I just want to make a quick note about a comment that I made a couple of weeks ago about no-go zones in Paris. And I just want to say that both leaders from both Paris and London came out and refuted those comments about the no-go zones that people have been making. And so I just want to retract that and apologize for my comments. And we need to give our viewers more, and I want to do that. So
well,
I
Eric,
just wanted to make that comment.
Apology accepted. You weren't the only one on that, so you weren't alone, but apology indeed accepted. We do like excellence here, and you provide it to us on a weekly basis, sir.
Yeah.
Moving on to this U.S.-Israel relationship now. No kumbayas here.
Absolutely, and it's only getting worse. And now that you've got this invitation to Netanyahu to come to address a session of joint Congress that was at the invitation of House Speaker John Boehner, this is only creating a greater sense of tension, palpable tension, if you will, between the White House and Bibi Netanyahu. And of course, one of the reasons this is actually taking place is because Bibi Netanyahu is actually this plays out well for him domestically, politically at home, to be seen as trying to push the United States to be more aggressive in its stance with Iran. But of course, President Obama is emboldened in his tactic in terms of how he wishes to engage with Iran on their nuclear program. And of course, he's getting a lot of pushback from the GOP-led Congress. And so this is an opportunity, I think, for them to kind of like poke the president in his eye, but at the same time, try to move them to take a more aggressive stance, which is both what Bibi Netanyahu and the GOP-led Congress wants.
Right.
So now you've got a huge battle of wills taking place.
Right. I was talking to one of my conservative friends who's an expert on this area, and he says this is perhaps an act of desperation by Netanyahu in response to these nuclear talks that have been taking place. What's your response to that?
Absolutely, it is. And like I said, this is a play for his domestic audience more so than it is a play for engaging on a foreign policy issue, because we have to understand, Iran, can be very tricky in how we deal with them. And we've already heard Ayatollah Khamenei come out and say that if, what they're looking for is the absolute removal of all sanctions before they began to even consider the possibility of disbanding this nuclear program.
Right.
Now, what the GOP-led Congress wants is they want greater sanctions, and they want them now.
Right.
And so, the president's in a very, tricky issue because he's got to look at this diplomatically.
Right.
And also, too, we need Iran in terms of our engagement with ISIL. So it's a very
in fact, I want to
tricky
talk
dance.
about that right now because we're running
Sure.
out of time here, Eric. In terms of ISIL right now, how we're dealing with them. By all accounts, it seems like another hostage has been murdered by ISIL. Then you have this Jordanian pilot there at the same time. And Jordan's saying that they will swap for a terrorist that they hold. The question is this a good policy? And of course, Bo Bergdahl was brought up in this whole thing about our swapping 5 Talibans for him. What should be done here? What are we not doing? What could change the tide against ISIL?
ISIL is in a very tough predicament right now. And actually, I think what we're seeing, particularly with this demand for $200 million in cash for these Japanese hostages, is when you're trying to build a state, ISIS is in need of cash. And also look at, while they've been able to, through militarily overtake a number of oil fields, you look at the price of oil globally and it's going down. So ISIL is actually running up against a huge cash crunch. At the same time, the United States has boxed itself into the corner, specifically the White House, because we did have that prisoner swap for Bo Bergdahl. And so that's becoming a major issue because now you've got a major ally of the United States, Jordan, who's actually seen as negotiating with ISIL, which is actually emboldening ISIL because now they're being seen as a state or an organ or at least an entity that needs to be reckoned with. So that's a major issue.
Eric, thanks so much here. Of course, a lot more with the situation. It's one heck of a mess. Thank you so much for your insight, sir.
You bet. Thank you.
As we reported at the top of the program, Boko Haram has launched a major assault on the Nigerian city of Maiduguri. The attack is underway at this hour. Rise News' Priya Sridhar is in Lagos. Priya, what is the latest?
That's correct. Well, this is the second weekend in a row that city, Maiduguri, has been attacked. It's in the northeastern state of Borno, and it's one of 3 states, actually, here in Nigeria that has been a Boko Haram stronghold. Now, obviously, this insurgency has been taking place for 5 years and has killed around 10,000 people and displaced about 1 million. It's a huge issue in the upcoming Nigerian elections that's scheduled to take place on February 14th. The international community is certainly watching. They're hoping that these elections are going to be peaceful and credible, but obviously with these latest attacks, which Boko Haram have said that they plan to escalate in the weeks coming up to the election, it's uncertain as to whether these elections are going to be able to go off without, without more attacks, and if people are really going to feel safe going to the polls. So at this hour, it seems like the violence is winding down, but certainly the people there are feeling very unsafe. We're hearing from our correspondent on the ground that they're staying inside, and we'll continue to monitor the situation and bring you the latest.
Okay, Priya Sridhar with the latest. Priya, thank you so much. The African Union is gearing up to send a multinational force against Boko Haram. 7,500 West African troops from Chad, Cameroon, Benin, and Niger will join Nigeria's fight against the terrorist group. Ground and air forces from Chad are already engaged across the border into Nigeria. They are credited with driving Boko Haram out of the town of Malam Fatori. Nigeria's newspaper This Day reports other towns are also being wrested away from the terror group with the help of troops from Chad and Cameroon. But today's attack on Maiduguri shows the situation is extremely fluid. Well, Arise News contributor Frankie Adozian is a professor and journalist with New York University's Reporting Africa program. Professor, Boko Haram has been rampaging up for years here, but we're also seeing now support coming from other countries.
Right.
But then we have this attack, what we're seeing now this hour on Maiduguri. What do you make of all this? And why has Boko Haram been able to flourish so long?
Boko Haram has been able to flourish so long because of the state of the Nigerian military, which is something the State Department has tried for the last couple of months to call attention to. Current President Goodluck Jonathan has often said that his predecessors are at fault for the state of the Nigerian military not having enough weapons to completely attack what is essentially a rampaging army. Boko Haram is no longer this ragtag group of bandits who are trying to form an Islamic caliphate. They actually have RPGs, cannons. This morning in Maiduguri, people were saying that there were cannons being shot in the air. There was also a suicide bomb on Patiscom. So they are attacking many different cities on many different fronts, and the army is too taxed to attack that.
Well, and I want to talk about that for a minute. We've talked a lot about ISIL, where they get their money from.
Sure.
You know, where is ISIL getting their money, support? Where are they recruiting their troops?
Well, in terms of Boko Haram, in terms of where they're recruiting people from, they are recruiting people who have for a very long time felt very disadvantaged. They have felt like people in other parts of the country have seen get education and get all the other things that come with development, and they have not gotten it. But there's also a sense that some of the Boko Haram fighters are not exactly volunteer fighters. Some of them are being conscripted into this as a means of survival. So it's sort of like if what do I need to do to survive? I can either join them or I can have my family slaughtered. So there's not a sense that I'm hearing from everyone that these are all voluntary fighters.
Thank you for correcting me, Boko Haram, ISIL. I meant Boko Haram, Professor. Yeah. I just want to, one quick thing before we go. The AU, okay, has new leadership. Robert Mugabe.
Yes.
He's a pretty controversial figure, Professor.
Sure. But I think we should distinguish between the chairmanship of the AU as per Zimbabwe. The chairmanship has rotated to Zimbabwe, not necessarily that African leaders have said Robert Mugabe, who's 90 years old and is still the head of Zimbabwe, is the one that we want to lead us. It's now Zimbabwe's turn, and whoever their president was would have been the chair of the AU.
All right, well, the question is now, with that being the case, with that truth that you have mentioned here, is this chairmanship more symbolic, or does it have any kind of power?
That position is a ceremonial position. It's one that it rotates. It's largely ceremonial, but it doesn't really have a lot of influence. I think when you think of African nations today, the ones who are the largest economies, Nigeria and South Africa, are the most influential.
Okay, well, look, you're going to stay with us as we'll have a lot more to talk about with you, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to explore this subject further when the Rise Review continues. Stay with us.
If I was to build my own news network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city.
Shahana Bhatt, Arise News, New Delhi.
Karim Gamaluddin, Arise News, Cairo.
Dale McEwen, Arise News, Karagosk.
James Blue, Arise News, Addis Ababa.
Ronnie Corvello, Arise News, São Paulo, Brazil.
We give them different angles on stories so they can get a different perspective of the people that they are looking at.
It's hard to pin down the exact number of Syrian refugees who have streamed across the border into Lebanon.
They stormed a media room in one of the hotels in Kuala Lumpur, holding placards reading, "Tell us the truth and return our families back to us."
Anchors and reporters that have covered wars, have covered disasters, have covered government shutdowns. There's nothing almost that this team hasn't experienced.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
One of
of the great things about Arise News, it is truly a multicultural global channel that is paying attention to communities of all different kinds, not just here in the United States, not just in Africa, but all around the world, as we're giving a voice to the people that don't traditionally have the kind of a voice that a mass media organization can have. You're getting here at Arise News that you're not going to find at the other networks is a unique perspective, and I think that's part of what Arise is here to do.
Because we live in a global, interconnected world, business news no longer stops when the markets close on Wall Street. And what we've discovered over the past few years of the financial crisis is that events and news that happen even in the smallest countries impact the United States and the world at large. As we bring together experts and analysts and thought leaders and CEOs and companies across many industries to not only provide the macroeconomic view, but news everyday people can use.
The great thing about Arise Entertainment 360 is that we cover the 360 of entertainment, food, fashion, lifestyle, culture. We're able to cover it all. And the thing I love most about the show is we're able to do a stunning combination of high and low. So we can talk about Rihanna on the red carpet, but we can also speak about high art with people like Sanford Biggers and Hank Willis. We actually spend quality time with our guests and we really get to know them. It's really intriguing because we get a 360 look at our guests.
More nations join the fight against ISIL. The United States is counting down to a crucial election. Has this sentence been influenced by the court of public opinion?
Everyone's vote is critical in these elections. We shouldn't turn this situation into Fortress America.
How can so much be put on President Obama when it comes to issues that are perhaps out of his control?
You got to have your big boy pants on in that job.
Arise Review begins right now. As we have been reporting this morning, the African Union is joining the fight against Boko Haram at a very crucial moment. Nigeria is heading into a presidential election. With the vote less than 2 weeks away, President Goodluck Jonathan is taking his campaign north. There are reports that his motorcade was attacked by people throwing rocks. Both he and his opponent, General Muhammadu Buhari, are being urged to try to keep the peace during and after the election. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry visited Nigeria last Sunday to deliver that message in person. Well, Arise News has team coverage of the campaign, of course. Joining Professor Edozian here in our studio are Priya Sridhar and Sarah Firth in Lagos. Priya, I want to start with you. Priya is covering President Jonathan, and Sarah is following the campaign of General Buhari. Priya, tell us about President Jonathan's campaign so far.
That's correct. Well, I got an opportunity to head to the southern part of the country, which is predominantly Christian, and that's really President Goodluck Jonathan's home turf. That's where he's hugely popular, and I was able to attend a campaign rally in the city of Uyo. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the PDP party, which is the party of President Goodluck Jonathan, has been dominating Nigerian politics for about 16 years. But Muhammadu Buhari, who my colleague Sarah Firth has been following, is presenting a strong challenge to him. There are three major issues, I would say, in this election: the economy, security, and also infrastructure. And basically, President Goodluck Jonathan is saying that, you know, his administration has brought positive change to the country, and he wants to continue to be that driving force in the coming years for Nigeria. And Sarah is going to tell us a little bit about how she's been following the opposition candidate, Muhammadu Buhari. Sarah, tell us more.
Well, certainly from having joined the campaign trail a number of times now, I can tell you the APC's presidential candidate, Muhammadu Buhari, is drumming up a huge amount of excitement, and that's because this presidential election is going to be a very, very close-run thing indeed. No one can predict the outcome of that, but to put it in context with what is happening at the moment in the Northeast, that is very important because the Northeast is an opposition stronghold. It's where the APC have a lot of support, and even before this latest attack on my Maiduguri, election officials had conceded that there were going to be a number of areas in the northeast where voting would not be able to take place, and also that there's going to be large areas where foreign observers are not going to be able to oversee the polling because of this unrest. So that causes concern because as the elections get closer, there's this huge focus on them being free, fair, transparent and credible, and it's very likely that you'll see the result challenged if you've got large parts that aren't able to participate in the vote because of the ongoing fighting. And if it's expected, as expected, the tally is so close.
I got to tell you here, you know, the situation certainly is fluid there, and as we're getting closer, there'll be a whole lot of ups and downs, and I guess, and drama involved with this. Priya, thank you so much. Sarah, you as well. Of course, we'll be talking to you before these elections actually take place. Frankie, I want to come back to you, Professor.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if there are any actual polls here regarding this election, but if we were to, like, take a snap picture of this today,
yes,
if the election were held today, who, in your opinion, would win?
It's hard to say because it's this close.
Really?
I mean, this is the first time that we have seen an opposition so strong. Usually the incumbent is the one who has all the momentum, and because they can tick off the list of things that they've done. In this particular case, the incumbent is popular, but he also has a long list of failures. We're talking about 7,500 African Union troops going into Nigeria. For the first time in Nigeria's history, since independence in 1960, we will have outside troops. But Nigerians do not like that.
I'm chomping at the bit here, Frankie, because this is what I don't understand. We have all this unrest in northern Nigeria.
Yes.
We have economic woes and problems right now. Some talk of corruption we've talked about months ago within this administration, and the election is this close?
Yes, yes. But there are several things at play here. You know, there are people who feel like Goodluck Jonathan, from the moment he became president, there have been forces at play, including Boko Haram, to destabilize his presidency and to not give him a fair shot. And so they feel that he has been running from behind and chasing things because there have been people who have been trying to destroy his presidency. And people feel very offended by that and feel like he should be able to do his work. On the other hand, there are people who have said that, you know, you had made promises. You promised to give people electricity. In today's New York Times, the celebrated Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie has this long piece about how there is no electricity still in Nigeria and people want the basic things. So Muhammadu Buhari is an alternative, and it's a very strong alternative because people know of his history.
Well, there may be a change in the balance of power here. We'll see.
We'll see. It could happen.
All right, Professor, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julian. Good morning.
And you're watching Arise Review.
Looking at mainstream news stations where only you have a very small minority of people of color being newscasters and actually having prominent roles in the media.
In a newsroom in the United States, maybe 10% of decision makers come from communities of diversity. That's not right.
Well, diversity is important because the more complete the news is, the more accurate a picture you're getting of the world, and the more you can form an accurate opinion of things.
The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people like me, people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News. Arise News, every culture, every angle.
If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and help benefit other people, not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
If I were to build my own news network, it would certainly have to reflect a diversity of culture, because that's the global situation, that's the global reality.
I would probably bring a lot of personal stories, really personal stories from the leaders of all countries.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back. Well, the next presidential election in the United States is not until 2016, but what they call the money primary is going on right now. The huge cost of launching and running a bid for the most powerful office in the world means candidates need to line up financial backers early. So it is big news that past candidate Mitt Romney is telling his supporters, never mind. He called them Friday to say he's releasing their commitment. This despite polls showing he would beat the rest of the field where the election held today. Romney says he wants a new generation to lead the Republican Party. Well, that's a swipe at Jeb Bush, who did not offer much support to Romney in 2012. But with his name recognition and ties to the Hispanic voters, Bush could be the man to beat. Well, all the Republican contenders will be seeking the support of two powerful brothers, Charles and David Koch. They are raising almost $1 billion to influence the next election. Together with other wealthy friends, they are wielding a lot of money as well as power. They call themselves Freedom Partners. Well, Liz Kennedy is counsel at Demos, an organization that advocates for political and economic equality. Liz, what do the Freedom Partners want?
Well, Julian, what we're seeing here is this injection of private economic power to dominate our democratic elections and public policy outcomes. So what they really want is to be able to change the dynamics of our elections and create a wealthy, dominating donor class, and we've seen then that our government is dependent on and thus responsive to their interests. It's fundamentally anti-democratic.
Well, I would say so, and of course, campaign limits, the spending limits, of course, went out the window a long time ago, and even with President Barack Obama raising the kind of money that he raised the first time running, getting all that money, a lot of it online. We're talking here about a lot of money. $889 million. I mean, where do they get this number from? I think I'm over at Walmart or something like that. 889. What about just a flat $1 billion? How do they come up with $889 million?
I don't know their internal, how they've decided to reach that number. I do know, however, that it is more than what each of the separate political parties, either the Democratic presidential and congressional committees or the Republican presidential and congressional committees spent. And so what we're seeing here is getting political power further and further away from the people. A democracy is one, literally the definition, where government is meant to be responsive to every citizen considered as a political equal. Instead, this elite, wealthy donor class derives its power from its wealth, and that's actually the definition of plutocracy in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Well, look, we go down the list here of how many millionaires there are in the Senate, how many millionaires there are in Congress. And how many millionaires, multimillionaires, have run for office? Why? A lot of people might say they're running for office because they want to make sure any legislation that comes into play, they can control it to control their money. Money is at the root of all this evil, isn't it, Liz?
Well, I think that you articulate this very well, because this is a moral and an ethical choice about whose voice matters. And right now, the Supreme Court, through, as you say, its Citizens United decision just 5 years ago, which allowed corporations to spend unlimited funds in election, but even their previous decisions going back 40 years ago, they've really misunderstood that the First Amendment does not give anyone the right to buy our American democracy. And as you say, the reason why this matters is because of public policy preferences. The very wealthiest elite actually disagree with the bipartisan majorities of Americans, particularly on economic issues. This is why we've seen the minimum wage completely stalling in the last 40 years, higher education being cut, and it's affecting people's actual lives because government is responsive to the wealthy elite instead of the majority of Americans.
So the bottom line is, if Julian wants to run for president and you as my vice president, Liz Kennedy, we have no shot.
Well, I will say there are a lot of current policies that can be implemented to make a big difference. We can empower small donors through public matching funds. New York City, for example, has a 6-to-1 match, which means that a waitress from Maine or a TV anchor in New York could run.
I kind of like that.
You and I, neither of us, I imagine, people are asking, who are these huge, wealthy donors? First of all, we won't know because they are not actually required required to disclose the true source of their funds, which is both completely contrary to what the Supreme Court expected in Citizens United and very unaccountable.
Okay, well, look, there won't be a chicken in every pot, I guess, from the 2016 election, but Liz Kennedy will be coming back at you with more insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Big-time finance was the focus in Davos, Switzerland at the recent World Economic Summit. Arise News business editor Andrew Schmertz was there and sent us this report.
Julian, the World Economic Forum has been called everything from the world's biggest schmooze fest to a giant time suck to an event where there's actually real conversations taking place with world and business leaders. What it's often not called, however, is effective. And that was very much on display this year. In fact, the head of the World Economic Forum says that the international system is simply broken. Why would he say that? Well, because the problems we're talking about this year are the same problems we were talking about last year and the year before: the threat of global terrorism, economic recession, and of course, economic inequality. Well, we sat down with one of Nigeria's richest men to talk about all of that, as well as the elections coming up in Nigeria. Tony, your conference is on confronting catastrophic outbreaks, obviously very timely. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I have quite some conferences I'm attending or panels I'm participating in, but one of them is about Ebola, the Ebola outbreak. But for me, at this point in time, as it is with the entire theme of the Davos, we should stop talking about challenges and begin to move towards action. Ebola has come, unfortunate situation, pandemics that we pray not to see again, but now we should be thinking of how to re-engage the communities that have been devastated by Ebola. How do we get them working again? How do we use economic solutions for providing succor, comfort, and hope and prosperity to these people? That, to me, is the key thing we should be talking about at this point in time.
And right now in Nigeria, it's the best of times, worst of times. So it's Africa's largest economy, but the country has enormous challenges. You have a terrorist group, obviously, that the government is having trouble controlling. And I've been to Nigeria several times. The per capita income is still pretty dismal. So how do you get these investment dollars there quick enough to make this difference?
So I think progress has been made. I think the current government and the one before this have done quite a lot in restructuring the fabric and the structure of our economy, that today things are moving on. Yes, oil price is a challenge now, but I think that Nigeria is on the right trajectory. But having said that, we need to see how we can improve further. And I think the transformation that is ongoing in the agri sector is good. The privatization of the electricity power sector is good. The rail line, revitalization of the rail line is also good for the country.
The World Economic Forum in Africa will take place this year in Cape Town. Africa, of course, becoming an increasingly important part of WEF. The continent includes some of the fastest growing economies in the world, but also includes a lot of challenges. In Davos, Switzerland, I'm Andrew Schmertz, Arise News. Julian.
Andrew hanging out there in all that cold with just a jacket on. I don't know how he does it. Anyway, it's Super Bowl Sunday in the U.S. The Seattle Seahawks are about to take on the New England Patriots. The big game takes place tonight in Arizona. It's almost always warm in Phoenix, but there's extra heat on this game because of a scandal called Deflategate. Well, it's all about the handling of footballs off the field in recent playoff games. It seems someone took slightly deflated balls used by the New England Patriots. That could make them easier to grip. Well, Patriots quarterback Tom Brady claims he has no idea how it happened. Neither does his coach Bill Belichick. The National Football League is investigating. But one thing is for certain, the balls used in tonight's big game will be tested very carefully. Well, sports journalist Didier Amarias joins us. Well, look, let's get Deflategate. I mean, come on. This is like the third known offense against the New England Patriots. They're talking about an investigation, but come on. I mean, to me, Belichick should have been fined, suspended for the game. Nothing much is going to happen here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know that they don't want to taint the Super Bowl. Obviously, a lot of eyes are going to be on the Super Bowl. So the NFL, they're going with the whole storyline that we're still investigating and we're going to continue to do interviews after the Super Bowl. They know they don't want any controversy tomorrow. There's already been a lot of discussion about Deflategate as it is, and I think the NFL is actually happy that a lot of the attention during this past media week has been on Marshawn Lynch. So if anything, they should be more thankful that Marshawn Lynch taking the heat off of them from Deflategate.
And a really cute thing with Marshawn Lynch with the whole Skittles thing, because apparently he really likes Skittles, so he actually opened his mouth up a little bit about Skittles. I guess it's somewhat kind of a commercial or whatever, but I thought it was kind of cute with Marshawn.
I think he's a marketing marketing genius. I think he's just playing all of us in the media.
I love it. I think he's even better than Sherman Williams at this whole thing. Let's talk about predictions here. Who do you think is going to win?
I think Seattle's going to win. The reality is they have such a potent defense. I mean, the Legion of Boom. Now, it's all going to be predicated on the health of Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman, because at the end of the day, that secondary is a little banged up. The other thing I also want to think that'll play a big role is the wide receivers for Seattle, because they don't have the big high-profile playmakers. Doug Baldwin and Jermaine Kearse are some really solid options. However, when you're going against Revis Island, Darrelle Revis, and Brandon Brown and some of these really well-established cornerbacks, I think that'll complicate things a little bit.
Well, here's the thing. The duel out at Diablo, Richard Sherman, Darrelle Revis, who do you think is a better cornerback?
I think technically, in terms of just technicality and the way he plays defense, I think Darrelle Revis is still better, and he is the veteran. At the same time, Sherman has the youth. He has the speed. They play a little different styles. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I would still give the edge over to Darrelle Revis.
Outside of the game itself, of course, a lot of people are watching for the commercials, and of course, the entertainment at halftime. We've got Lenny Kravitz and, of course, Katy Perry. This draws a lot of people to the game as well.
Yeah, and Missy Elliott. I mean, Missy Elliott's coming out of nowhere. She's been hidden for all these years, but I think it's going to be great because it's going to hit a bunch of different audiences and reach a lot of different demographics. You have Katy Perry, who can hit some of the youth. You have Lenny Kravitz, who can hit some of the older audiences. And you even have Missy Elliott, who she kind of hits both of them in a sense, because she is that OG, so to speak.
And of course, Katy Perry, the biggest draw, of course, with millions of records sold worldwide. She certainly has an international audience. But let's move on here. This 30-second commercial that the NFL is going to put out here against domestic violence. I got to tell you right now, I've been talking about this all the time. They're making NFL the poster boys of domestic violence, which is absolutely a farce, because domestic violence is half of that in the NFL than it is the national average in the United States, as well as other crimes. But yet and still, people keep continuing to put the NFL up here as poster boys for all the ills that America holds. And I think it's absolutely atrocious.
I completely agree with you. I think it comes off as ingenuine, because the reality of the situation is the NFL, they realize that they messed up the whole Ray Rice investigation. So now they're trying to leverage the fact that, hey, the Super Bowl, let's show everybody how committed we are to domestic violence and raising awareness of this. And it really comes off as ingenuine. The timing is also bad in a sense, because if you think about it, the Super Bowl is known as a party. Everybody's having fun. So in a sense, you put out some of these commercials, and it's almost like if you're at a party and you're enjoying yourself with some friends and somebody's like, hey, let's talk about domestic violence. So not really the best of timing to get that point across.
Lastly, your favorite food for the Super Bowl, what are you going to be eating while you're watching?
Wings, baby. Can't go wrong with chicken.
You can't go wrong with chicken. They better be blackened chicken wings, too. Those are mine.
I got
my favorite.
Absolutely. You can come over. We're going to have a big party
Okay, real quickly, spread, score, what do you think?
Oh, score, I'm going 27-20 Seattle Seahawks.
Okay, I got you.
All right.
Sounds good. Didier Moraes, you are the man.
Thank you.
Eat those chicken wings. Controversy isn't just limited to the Super Bowl. When we return, we'll tell you about the decision at the Africa Cup that has many people still talking. Stay with us for more on Arise Review.
Here at Arise America, we want to bring you news from a different perspective, and not just news, but analysis as well. So let me ask you this. What is the realistic possibility of an inmate dying during one of these cell extractions?
Well, there have been many cases in which inmates have died through asphyxiation, through seizures, etc.
Now you have this little thumb drive, and you're using it, and now the Trojan horse sits in your computer. So you decide to go on some website, you decide to buy something. I've got now access to your bank, your credit card information, all your personal information.
You never are paid what you are needed. You are paid what you are able to deliver.
Acting as
Hitting
if the
two
workplace
buddies is never going to be
you're
worth
acting as if the
$22.
workplace today is the way it was when Debbie and I, and maybe you, I don't know, maybe that was a different generation, not sure, were coming up.
Arise serves underserved communities by bringing them news, information, sports, and entertainment from places that are becoming part of the world economy, that are becoming a part of the world voice, and decisions that are affecting things in the world that people care about. They care about the economy. They care about safety and security. And if you come to Arise and you watch our broadcast, these are the things we're going to bring to you every day, 24 hours a day.
Arise News is a different kind of network. We are able to tell our own stories, and we're able to cover stories in a way that other media outlets don't do. We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well. Arise News is a place where we can tell stories in an interesting, factual, inclusive way like no one else in the business can.
One of the great things about Arise Entertainment 360 is we have this Arise to Your Health segment, which really focuses on the holistic approach of being healthy. So we do everything from working out to juicing to getting in shape by doing fun exercises like bouncing on a trampoline or wearing these bouncy boots on our feet when we're jumping all over the set. We've done karate, we've danced the weight off, we've done just about everything. And of course, I love when we eat on set, but we do it in a very healthy and clean way.
More nations join the fight against ISIL. The United States is counting down to a crucial election. Has this sentence been influenced by the court of public opinion?
Everyone's vote is critical in these elections.
We shouldn't turn this situation into Fortress America.
How can so much be put on President Obama when it comes to issues that are perhaps out of his control?
You got to have your big boy pants on in that job.
Arise Review begins right now. And we continue with sports. We're heading into the final week of the Africa Cup of Nations, but not without a lot of people still scratching their heads over the way a decision to advance was made. Well, sports journalist Henry Okapara joins us. Earlier this week when it came to Mali and Guinea, there was a situation there. Tell us about what happened.
Well, first of all, great to be here. Well, it's just, it was a group. It had the Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Guinea, and Mali. And basically, they all drew. They all finished up with the same points, the same goal difference.
So it was tied.
Everything was the same, except for the Ivory Coast, which in the last match they beat Cameroon 1-0. So they were separated. They became tops, and now they had a decision had to be made on who would be the next team because Mali and Guinea were tied. They had the same goal difference. They had the same results. So they had to draw the lots. And it's not something that actually happens all the time, but it is in the rules. You had situations like in 1954 where Turkey and Spain, they played out a 90 minutes of football game. They had to determine who would get to the next round. They drew lots. Turkey qualified ahead of Spain in 1988 in an African Cup of Nations at the expense of the Ivory Coast. Algeria got through. Then in the 1990 World Cup, in a group that had Italy, Netherlands, and Ireland, they had to determine who would finish, the rankings, second and third, and lots were drawn. It's not, people would say it's not an effective way of deciding, but those are the rules, except, they could come up with something different, then we could go with it. In the 2008 Euros, we did, something like that was going to happen between the Turkish national team and the Czech Republic, but UEFA then decided that whichever, if it came to that, if they drew, then they will be straight go out of penalty kicks. It didn't happen, but like I said, it's not something that happens all the time, but the rules are the rules.
That's what I love about you sports journalists. You can pick up facts from like 200 years ago, BC, and come up with all this stuff. I mean, this obviously is not a scandal. This is not the deflate gate or anything like that.
But it is sad. It's not, I mean, you expect that whatever decision would be made in the field of play and then play out, let every team play out and let the result count. But like I said, those are the rules.
Well, who's advancing now?
Well, quarterfinal stages, they actually had two matches that were played yesterday. The Equatorial Guinea played Tunisia. Equatorial Guinea qualified. There was a little bit of controversy in that match, but they did qualify. Then the DR Congo and Congo Brazzaville, another team, the DR Congo, they beat Congo 4-2. And today's matches, we're having Ghana. They're currently leading against Guinea. And the Ivory Coast will be playing Algeria.
Who's your favorite?
My favorite would be Algeria. I mean, ordinarily, I would have gone with the Ivory Coast because they've got better, players in terms of quality. They've got in terms of experience, they're a lot more experienced than the other teams. But they always choke, and they haven't been particularly impressive.
I don't want to hear you say that, Henry.
No, but they've not been particularly impressive in this African Cup of Nations. It's been very dry. They've not really lived up to expectation, and they face a team in Algeria that is regarded as the best national team in Africa at the moment.
Okay, well, we're going to hold you to whom you think might be the best, but thank you so much for joining us. And by the way, Seahawks, Patriots, who do you got?
I'm going to go with the Seahawks because I don't think the Patriots deserve to be in the finals.
Oh, my goodness. How could you say that?
I would say that.
That's unpatriotic, Henry.
No, the Seahawks for me. I'm not a fan of the Seahawks, but like I said, Patriots don't deserve to be there.
Okay, I'm with it. Goodbye, Henry.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on Arise Review. You can keep in touch with all Arise News programs on Facebook. I'm Julian Phillips. Have a great, prosperous, and productive week. Go Seahawks.